Is everybody ready? Yes. Okay. Well, let's see what we have here. This beautiful bag was created by someone in our church. And let's see what's inside of it. Why? It is a little piece of the desert. You know, the desert is so big, we couldn't fit it all into our sanctuary, but here we have a whole piece of the desert right here. Ooh, look at that. You know, the desert is a dangerous place. In the day, it is very hot, and at night, it gets very cold. And so you need water to keep going and to grow your crops and to have food. Let's see what else we have to tell our story. Well, here is some water. And a little more. You know, once there was a family, and where they were living, which was somewhere in here, yeah, somewhere in there, everyone thought that God was here or there. God was in this place, which meant God couldn't be in this other place at the same time. Gods might move around. But there was one family that thought, no, God is in all things and is all the time with us. And Abram and Sari were part of that family. Let's see who we have for Abram and Sari today. Abram and Sari were part of that family. And it came time for the family to move, and so the whole family moved, oxen and cows and people and children, and it was a long journey. And they would camp in their tents at night, and they stayed close to the Euphrates River so that they would have water for them and for all of their livestock. And sometimes at night, Moses would go out and face the desert, and God would come so close to Moses. And Moses would be so close to God that Moses could hear God. And God said, keep going. And they came to the city of Haran, and they were on the outside, and they thought, we're almost there. This is great. This is where we're going to be. And Moses went out, and God came close to Moses, and Moses could hear God, and God said, no, you need to keep going. I thought, okay, well, great. So they went through Haran, and they kept going to the west. And then they went out towards the desert away from the water. And they went to a place called Shechem. And they gave thanks to God, and they built a little altar there. And God came close to Abram, and God said, keep going. And so they said, okay. And so they kept going. And then sometimes Sarah might lead, and then Abram would follow, and you just never know. And then they stopped at a place called Bethel, and they gave thanks to God, and God came and close to Abram, and Abram heard God say, keep going. And they said, okay, we'll keep going. And his wife put up with this.
That's the real miracle.
And you know some of the stories. And they finally got to a place called Hebron, near the oaks of Mamre, and they said, I think this is where we are to be. And so they put down their tents, and you may remember the story of the 3 visitors who came and said, God is going to bless you with children that outnumber the stars. And they, what? They laughed. They thought this was very funny, because they were very old, and this was the end of their lives, they thought. But then sure enough, they had a little one who they named Isaac, which means laughter. And then Sarah was very old and she died, and they buried her near the oaks of Mamre. And then that caused, apologies. Shh, before that happened, we still had Sarah. We just went backwards. Rewind. When they heard that they were going, and they laughed, they were also, somewhere in there, they also were renamed. And they took on the names of Abraham and Sarah. And then they had Isaac, and then okay, here we go. And Abram realized that he was not going to be with us that much longer, but there were things he still needed to do. And one of the things he wanted to do was to find a wife for his son. And so he sent his most trusted servant to go back to where some of his people were who landed outside of Haran. They didn't make this big journey. And so the servants went back past Bethel and past Shechem towards Haran and stopped and met someone at the well there named Rebekah. And Rebekah was so kind and said, "Can I help you? Can I give you some water from this well? Can I give some water for your animals?" And the servant was taken with Rebekah, and she said, "Well, come." And he said, "Do you want to be a part of this great family?" And she said, "Well, yeah, okay, let's go talk about that with my parents." And so they had dinner with her parents, and the parents gave permission. And so Rebekah and the servant made the long journey out into the wilderness to meet Isaac. And that was a good match. And eventually, yes, Moses died and they buried him. Abraham died and buried him in the same tomb that they had buried Sarah. And these two had a family, and they had a family, and they had a family, and that goes on and on and on until, indeed, all of the descendants of Abraham and Sarah were more than what you could count.